Today I'm reacting to Ferrari's brand spanking new 12-cylinder Grand Tour.
Mate, what are you doing? Come on,
12-cylinder.
Today, we're talking about the new Ferrari 12 Cilindri.
So we have got a lot to discuss. Here it is, the new Ferrari 812 successor named the Ferrari 12 Cilindri. We're gonna cover aesthetics, engine, price. It's really expensive. We're gonna discuss disgruntled 812 Competitzione owners.
No, please, ask them please to wait and discuss with me.
And lack of perceived exclusivity. More on that in a minute, but first, to the name, 12 Cilindri. I thought when I read the press release that they'd actually left part of the name out of the name. Let's just discuss why this is important. Every contemporary Ferrari V12 of modern history has had a sort of naming convention or reason behind it. So you've got the 550 Maranello, home city of Ferrari. 599 GTB, Gran Turismo Berlinetta, and a Berlinetta is a two-seater sports car. The 599 GTO, Gran Turismo Omologato, meaning road legal homologated race car, which the GTO absolutely wasn't, but regardless, it was a statement of that car's focus driver's intent. F12 Berlinetta, F12 TDF, celebrating the iconic Tour de France road race. 812 Superfast, which was a tip of the hat to the 1960s Superfast 500. We could go on. 812 Competitzione, bit of a mouthful, but at least it has a statement of intent that this is a focused driver's car. 12 Cilindri, that's it. There's nothing after that. It's just literally, if you want to say it in English, the Ferrari 12 cylinders. We know it's got 12 cylinders. What does it stand for? I still haven't got used to saying it. Have you seen the new Ferrari 12 Cilindri yet? Just doesn't roll. What will happen, just like the 812 Comp, is people are going to start abbreviating this to 12C. But a 12C is a McLaren. I mean, what's next? What's the next V6? The 6 potty? Where are we going with this? There's one thing for sure, it stirred up some chat online.
Let her have it, son.
We'll get to that in a minute because we asked over 5,000 of you what you thought about how this car looked, and we'll share that shortly. Let's get on to the topic of the engine. Now, this thing is a magnificent slice of the automotive holy grail. 9,500 naturally aspirated Ferrari V12 Cilindris to play with, mated to, for the first time in a front-engine V12 Ferrari, a twin-clutch 8-speed gearbox. And this thing is over 820 horsepower. Now, if I was an 812 comp owner, of which I've spoken to a few, you're so pissed off about this.
Please, guys, do something, please. I cannot still believe it.
It wasn't long ago. In fact, they're still making this car. This car is still in production. The 812 Comp is still being built, and that is the unicorn flagship front-engine V12 that Ferrari currently make. And its defining USP when it launched was the fact that it revved to 9,500 RPM. Now, the reason 812 Comp owners are annoyed about this is because you can't just get an 812 Comp. You have to go through many of Ferrari's hoops to buy all of the depreciating cars that you don't want in order to tick enough boxes to go ahead and buy the one car that you do want.
So unfair. I cannot believe they do this to me.
Which is fine, because once you get hold of an 812 Comp, the values are so over list. They're about £500,000 over list. That you kind of don't mind, and you're almost break even off the back of the Roma Spider that you had to buy. Not so with the 12 Cilindri. Let me tell you why. Now, why this engine is special is it's completely naturally aspirated in a world that's going hybridized EV. This is just pure fire-breathing NAV12 horsepower, which is something that Ferrari should be celebrated for doing. If you are lucky enough to be getting into one of these, I have no doubt it's going to be unbelievable drive. The reason I say that is it looks like a heavily redressed 812 Comp. That is not a bad thing. It's one of the best Ferraris ever made. It has the same revised rear wheel system, so you're having that similar 20mm virtual shortening of the wheelbase. Your car is slightly longer and slightly heavier. Chances are it won't have dissimilar performance to an 812 Comp. And I'm going to say something controversial, despite the fact that over 5,000 of you have said that it doesn't look great. I think give it some time. There are some angles where I see it and I'm like, crikey, that is absolutely stunning. Others, I'm like, that is a minging old Rover. Yes. But I said that about the Ferrari FF, and it evolved to be one of the most beautiful cars. The V12 Lusso, for me, is now spectacular. Like, I would have one in the garage for sure. And I think, even though this is a totally different aesthetic departure from the design language of the past generation of Ferrari, I don't know, I've just got a feeling it's gonna age well.
Sorry, right now I cannot talk. I'm too angry, too disappointed, too...
However, my concern about this is a WhatsApp that I received about 3 months ago. I'm gonna put it on screen right now and we're gonna blur out the details as not to embarrass the dealership that reached out to me cold via a WhatsApp message. What I mean by this is, I received a cold WhatsApp text from a dealer that I've never purchased from asking if I would like to buy a 12 Cilindri. Didn't know what its name was at the time, but the interesting thing was it was offering me a very early build slot on one of these cars, one of the UK's first cars. Now let me tell you why this is concerning. Not because a dealer cold WhatsApped me, but because I haven't ordered a new Ferrari for over 5 years, meaning I have zero clout on what Ferrari calls my modus profile, which is an internal system Ferrari uses to vet their customers for allocations on cars. And yet, despite flipping my TDF outside of the dealer network, which they really hate, and not ordering any new Ferrari for over half a decade, and having no modern Ferrari in current ownership in my garage, I was offered one of the first 12 Cilindris in the country. Now, why is this a problem? Values and depreciation. So what that says to me is that the numbers that they will be making of this car will be copy, paste, print. They are going to be making as many of these as they possibly can. Now, this is an issue because in the world of the 812 Comp, which is a limited edition special with a defining USP, aka 9,500 naturally aspirated Ferrari V12 RPM, that's cool. Small production run. This car will be printed out, as many as they can make. Now, as we sit here right now, Ferrari's production car values are suboptimal. Take, for example, the SF90. There's some examples of those being 150 grand in depreciation. Now, this is currently their flagship car outside of the Icona series. But why it's additionally concerning is that on the 12 Potty is the price. 395,000 euros, sir, before options, and 435,000 euros on the Spider before options. And Ferrari, by their own words, are admitting that most customers are going to spend €500,000 with options on these cars. Seemingly, they're okay to reach out to me, who in the Ferrari world is a nobody, and offer me a day one early build slot. Take, for example, right now, the Lamborghini Revuelto. You try getting your hands on one of those cars. Naturally aspirated, 9,500 RPM V12. It is connected to a hybrid drivetrain, but on paper, this is a thoroughbred supercar. You cannot get one of those for the best part of 2 years, and if you were to buy one right now, they're 150,000 over list. So we asked you guys over on Instagram. We put up pictures of the 12 Cilindri. Never going to get used to saying that. 5,190 of you voted on the aesthetics of that car on a nailed it to failed it ratio of 68% failed it, 32% nailed it. So the people have spoken. It's just most people are saying, oh, it's fugly. I'm going to reserve judgment. It's one thing having the data that the people have spoken and they think it looks like a turd. However, there are some angles for me that I actually think looks fantastic. The thing is, I'm a little bit concerned that the angle on any car that should always be a success is the front 3/4 and the rear 3/4. And the front 3/4, to me, that bit you failed. Now just onto the gearbox. I was very fortunate to have had ownership of an F12 and an F12 TDF. And those transmissions, the relationship, the marriage between the NAV12 and that twin clutch box is one of the most sublime pairings in the automotive world. The actuation under heavy braking from high RPM down through that gearbox, which was previously a 7-speed twin clutch box, was unbelievable. The calibration was exceptional. In this, I'm reading it's even faster, even sharper. If you were to try a TDF box or an 812 comp box, it feels like they're on the edge of physics, of like you couldn't actuate cogs any faster, and yet the suggestion here is that it's been refined even further. What this drive will be like will be phenomenal. Probably gonna need an exhaust, but it'll be one of the most amazing experiences from something with a V12 engine in it. Despite the fact you might go on about the way this thing looks or its price or whatever it is, I mean, it's really expensive. For Ferrari to be able to maintain a non-hybrid, non-turbo, fire-breathing V12 in this day and age, that is something that should be celebrated without exception. So on to the aesthetics and where its, I guess, inspiration and interpretation has come from. The original Daytona. Now, this is where it kind of gets a little bit weird. It's influenced heavily, particularly in the nose, by the 1960s, 70s Ferrari 365 GTB, which is commonly referred to as the Daytona. Now, the strange thing about this is Ferrari have already got a new car in the Icona series called the SP3 Daytona. Now, in this case, the SP3 Daytona is an actual homage to the original P-Series cars that crossed the line in Daytona back in the day, also mid-60s, and they secured in 3 prototype Ferraris a 1, 2, 3 podium. Now, weirdly, at that time, the media and enthusiasts, for whatever reason, began referring to the 365 as the Daytona. It was never actually an official Ferrari designated Daytona car, something that enthusiasts made up. So, to that effect, a better name then might have been the Ferrari 12 Cilindri GTB, because it's definitely a Gran Turismo Berlinetta, and by Ferrari's own press release, there is aesthetic homage to the 365 GTB. It's confusing because the Daytona is a mid-rear engined Icona series special edition. Great investment. I don't know, this one to me, there's a little bit of a convoluted mixed messaging, and it also looks a bit like a Rover SD1. Exhaust sound. So, one of the main reasons that as a purist petrolhead that buys a car with this and not with this is because we are thoroughly invested emotionally in what a naturally aspirated V12 brings to the table, which is namely one of the most phenomenal sounds in the automotive world. Now, this is no fault of Ferrari. This is the rules and regulations from the world of building cars that has applied all sorts of red tape and nonsense onto cars, which sonically choke the sound of that naturally aspirated V12 that you're going to be paying around about €500,000 for with options. Now, for a spot of context, a decent UK decibel limit on a track day is 105 decibels. Typically at that point, given a few cases, they get capped out at that time. So if you've ever been on a track day and you've heard a car fly past on full chat and it sounded great, that's around about 105 decibels. Ferrari have had to restrict their decibel output of that V12 from the exhaust to 72 decibels. This is going to sound like a really posh Dyson. The irony of this is what you're paying for is the V12. The reason you're paying for the V12 is for the sound. So what Ferrari has done cleverly, and I think this is brilliant, is going, okay, we're going to mute the tailpipe exhaust so that it meets those rules and regs, but we're going to reprofile the sound deadening on the inside so that the sound of the engine and the sound of the exhaust are redirected into the cabin, into the cockpit of the car. If I hadn't have experienced this on the Porsche GT4 RS, which you wouldn't know that had a GT3 engine in it from the outside, it sounds quite dull, but on the inside, it's borderline obnoxious. It sounds like a stripped out cup car. And if Ferrari have managed to take this rules and applied it in such a way like Porsche did, this could actually be, internally, one of the greatest sounding road-going Ferraris ever made. Interesting strategy here, and I'm not sure if Ferrari have ever done this, but they've announced the Coupe and the Spider as a simultaneous launch. The last time I can remember a car brand doing that in the supercar bracket is McLaren when they did a facelift from the 12C to the 650S. And because that was a short-lived run, because it was basically a sort of midlife product refresh, instead of dragging it out because they had other cars to launch, ultimately ended up becoming the 675 LT, they launched the Coupe and Spider at the same time. And I feel it sort of set the tone for this is a car we don't care about. we want to get this out there. We're just not going to drag it out and do the whole customer journey thing. If you want the Coupe, there it is. If you want the Spider, there it is. Historically, Ferrari customers have gone on the journey, where you typically get into the Coupe, you have an arrangement with the dealer that you're going to bring it back in when the Spider's launched, you're going to part-ex it against the Spider, everyone's happy. In this, it's just Coupe or Spider. I'm going to be fascinated to see how that goes because the 812 Superfast that this car is succeeding, that GTS journey was quite the hype. They made them in much smaller production runs than they did the Coupe, and typically, when we look back in history, the GTS will always be the more special version of that platform. Today, they're just going, you can have either or, and this one's another 50 grand more if you want it or not. To me, that smells a little bit like PLC-ness, where they're trying to cram in as much sales as they can, a bottom line profit. And this is probably the ultimate segue to end this. What do I know? Ferrari last year were the most profitable car manufacturer per unit sold. So for some context, let's take the top 3. In third place was Mercedes-Benz. Per unit sold, just over €7,000 profit. Tesla, per unit sold, just over 9,500 euros profit. So where do you think Ferrari sits as number one place, given we've got around 9,000 euros?
50 G's, baby!
You would think so, at best, right? Try 10x number two at over 90,000 euros profit per unit.
Show me the money!
Disproportionately so. Just before I wrap this up, they are killing it. So just before I wrap this up, for Toyota to make the same profit as Ferrari do for one car, Toyota have to sell 53 cars. So everything I've just said is irrelevant. There's probably a long waiting list for them. They're all sold out, and I want one.